Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Pearson, and we are back for another installment of Inside the Music. And I want to welcome our guest, Richard Bobo. He is our Symphony of Northwest Arkansas. He plays with us in our bassoon section and is also our librarian. Welcome, Richard. It's good to have you.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, we are so excited about this concert coming up on January 7th. That's just like right around the corner. It's titled Mother and Child, and we have some pretty incredible, exciting news about it, but we'll get to that in just a minute. But I want to first start by kind of getting to know you a little bit better. I know you because I've worked with you, but our audience may not know you besides seeing you up on stage playing your instrument. So I want to start by talking about what first got you into like music and performing and the bassoon.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have one of those like destiny stories, where I was like 3 and saw someone playing the bassoon and knew that that was going to be the rest of my life. My story with playing the bassoon was I was in band. I was like the third worst trombone player, and my band director asked me if I wanted to play bassoon, and I had no idea what that was, so of course I said yes.
Oh, no.
Um, and it kind of worked out. So I sometimes use that as a story for, sometimes it's worth trying the crazy thing that you don't know if you'll love just to see where it goes.
That's awesome. So you started in band, right? And then you switched to bassoon. So how did that go? I mean, going from the trombone, that embouchure, to learning to play on a double reed was a big shift, right?
Yeah, well, it helped that I didn't really know what I was doing. So for
Okay.
like the first year, I had no idea how wrong I was playing the bassoon,
Oh, no.
which makes the transition easier.
Right.
Well, in the short term.
Right.
It wasn't really until I started taking lessons on bassoon that I realized, oh, maybe this wasn't the best way to start the bassoon, but it worked out. My poor band director, it worked out well enough for me that he tried it at least one other time, switching a trombone player to bassoon. It didn't work out again, but really playing the bassoon, it's more about an interest.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with switching from like a brass instrument to bassoon. In fact, our the young man who played second bassoon in our last concert, Josue, he started on trumpet. He
Right.
just really
You
wanted
said
to play
you were
bassoon.
eclectic, right? I mean, you can play those instruments. Do you still remember how to play the trombone or not really?
I mean, I remember how.
Okay.
I mainly use that to play. I used to play sackbut in my early music ensemble
Okay.
a little bit, but I've kind of passed on brass instruments.
Right. Well,
Leave
I
that
think
to the experts.
you found your calling in the bassoon. So, who inspires you to make music? Obviously, you are a professional musician, and you have ever since your days in middle school band and switching to bassoon. Along that journey, who's inspired you to continue to make music?
Well, I have to say that my teachers all throughout high school, were playing bassoon is tough because band directors only have so many hours in the day, and they kind of focus those hours on how they can help the most people. Your clarinets, your flutes, your trumpets. Bassoons, you're lucky if you have one. So the band directors usually lean pretty heavily on the private lessons instructors. So, like growing up, I took private lessons with a woman from the university named Hong Lee,
Okay.
and then someone, Jesse Sharts, he still a bassoonist, and then of course Leah Uribe, who is the professor of bassoon at the University of Arkansas. I took lessons with her when I was in high school, even though now I look 10 years older than her.
That's awesome though. That I mean, our private teachers are really really important, and our band teachers. You know that I teachers it's like a I think are underappreciated in how much they help really boost and propel people's trajectory and where they're going to head. And I think that's true, evident obviously in your path as well. What how would you describe the music that you typically like create, play? I don't know if you compose. I don't know if I've ever asked you that or not, but I know that you play obviously with several orchestras.
Um, hmm. So I tend to, so if I'm arranging or composing something, it tends to be more focused towards what I would enjoy playing. I'm kind of
Okay.
selfish in that respect. I I play mainly because I enjoy playing, not out of some higher cause to, bring beauty and balance into the universe. I mean, that's what we're supposed to say, but I, I enjoy
Keeping it
playing.
real. That's all good.
Um, and I'm not a serious composer, so the few things I have composed are mainly to kind of like demonstration pieces, kind of like, okay, these are some things that these instruments can do that maybe you didn't know about, and maybe a competent composer will listen to them and say, oh, they can do some of those things. I'm going to write something good for them.
I think that's wonderful because it holds value for that, because not everyone has that ability to be able to do that. So I think all of it morphs and works together. So I think it's important.
Yeah,
Um,
and it also really takes the pressure off if, like, me as a composer, I know I'm not good,
yeah,
so I don't have to be good. I can just do it.
that's awesome. If you could play any famous work or piece of music, what would you play?
Well, once again, I have to say, so the Ravel Concerto for the Left Hand has a
Okay.
huge contrabassoon solo. Never got to play it.
Oh,
There's also Beethoven's Missa Solemnis has a terrifyingly difficult contrabassoon part that I've never got to tackle. Once again, my interests lie in kind of like the minutia of my own world a little bit. So
that's a
well, and then for reasons we're going to talk about, Goreski 3 coming up on January 7th
yeah,
has quickly become that concert for me.
that's awesome. Yeah, to be able to make that kind of a reality since others have not happened yet, but hopefully they will. Um, so what is a useless talent that you have? We're going to kind of do some fun things for a couple of minutes, and then we'll swing back to what we're going to talk about for our concert coming up. What are some useless talents that you have that maybe nobody knows about that, or a fun fact about yourself?
Hmm. Well, one I can't. I'm not going to demonstrate because it's a little bit gross. I can touch my tongue to my nose.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
when I was in elementary school, that was the coolest thing.
I remember
Uh,
those.
yeah, I had a little bit of a history as a performance artist, I guess
Okay.
I should say. Other useless talents. I mean, some would argue playing the contrabassoon. I also play the tenoroon, which is an instrument that no one writes for.
So tell us
Um,
a little bit because our audience probably won't know. What is a tenor room?
a tenoroon is just a bassoon, but smaller.
Okay, so like kind of like a tenor saxophone, like or the kind of idea. It's a
Yeah,
higher.
yeah. So kind of like if you take the word bassoon and you kind of anachronistically assume that it's short for bass oon,
Okay.
then you just do tenor oon.
All right.
And
Well, there you go. I learned something new today, and so did our audience. That's very cool. What would you be doing right now if you were not doing music for a career? Were there
uh,
other aspirations or things that you were interested in that you chose to do music?
yeah, I mean, I really uh I suppose my interests were as always more in like the engineering math
Mhm.
side of things. So if I weren't doing music, I'd probably be doing something um, in that realm.
Great.
There's this impression that music is like completely separate from anything technical or any hard science. And that's something even a lot of musicians like to imagine,
Mhm.
um, because a lot of them have no desire to ever take another math or take any math for the rest of their lives, and that's why they chose music. But I always like to
Music
think
is math.
about I always like to think about music as applied math. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. Our ears are the most sensitive mathematical tools we have at our disposal.
Yeah.
Uh, we're just so good at it, that are innately good at it, that we don't even think about it as in that way.
I agree. Well, that's very, very cool. My son's studying to be a civil engineer, so
Awesome.
it's very, very definitely less of math. But he was one state on the tuba, so I mean, he's a musician too. So what, where have you performed? What is your favorite venue that you performed, and or least favorite venue?
Um, hmm, most
Meaning
most
like
favorite.
a concert hall for our audience, if they don't know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a most favorite.
Or maybe a place that you someday would be like, I want to be able to say I've performed there.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm a okay. I'll come up with something. A unnamed small recital hall in Appleton, Wisconsin,
Okay.
because that is where I got to play a duo recital with one of my childhood idols, Susan Nigro. The closest thing to a world famous contrabassoon soloist there is. We put
Mm-hmm.
together a small recital there, and that I have no recollection about the hall. I don't even think it was a music hall. It was, I think,
Okay.
like a drama hall.
Mm-hmm.
And the contrabassoon concerts, they normally don't give us the big fancy halls, but yeah, that's one that I'll always remember, just because.
Of the whole experience and how
Yeah.
special it was. That's awesome. So who is a musician that you admire, that maybe it's a bassoonist or someone that has inspired you? Even, and it could be like current or previously.
Well, I grew up in Northwest Arkansas. I'm from Rogers, Arkansas. I graduated high school there. And growing up, there's just no contrabassoon exposure whatsoever.
Mhm.
And I've had a chance to talk to him since then, to meet him in person. But Juan de Gomar, the contrabassoonist with the Atlanta Symphony, used
Okay.
to play in a bassoon quartet with his fellow organ, when he used to play in the organ symphony.
Mhm.
And they put out these CDs that were kind of deliberately cheesy. And there are some musicians who turn up their nose at that, but I told him when I got to meet him that growing up, this is one of the first things I heard that made me think, oh, you can actually play that instrument well. It's not just a noisemaker.
Right. That's awesome that you have that like connection, and that early on that was someone that inspired you, that even though they weren't there locally. And that's my stopping grounds, because I'm here in Tennessee and it's just like 90 minutes south of us.
Mm.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about your instruments that you're. I think it's cool to know that if you had not been a musician, you would have gone into engineering, because you've been using those skills. Do you want to talk a little bit about your instrument that's behind you, right? The one that's on the wall that is going to be premiered at this concert coming up in January.
Yeah, yeah. So right immediately behind me, I have the contrabassoon. This is the normal instrument, nice, reasonably sized. Um, and it covers the lowest notes of the piano, down to low B flat, uh, that area. But the orchestra never really had at its disposal an instrument capable of playing to the lowest notes of the organ.
Mm.
Um, so I built one. Behind me is the first prototype subcontrabassoon, a full octave below the contrabassoon. So that's an oct. In order to lower something by an octave, you have to make it twice as long. Now, if you're talking about like a flute to a piccolo, well, you're cutting off like 8 inches. Not that big of a deal. When you're talking about a subcontrabassoon, you're taking an instrument that's about 20 feet long
Yeah,
and making it 40 feet long.
like the length of a school bus, right? Where this is similar to, like, if you were to unravel a French horn, it'd be like a garden hose, and then a tuba would be like a school bus kind of idea, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there's not really any way to get around. It's just a big um it's a big complex piece of engineering. But
Do you
yeah.
want to show our audience? Is it as tall as you or how do you play it standing? Do you play it sitting? How do you play it?
So it is about as tall as me.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely would be taller than me because I'm like a whole 5'2".
But I designed it to be played while sitting.
All right.
Um, there's a couple of reasons for that, mainly because there's height variability. People have different heights, and I didn't want an instrument that only could be played by me or people roughly my size. So if you talk about sitting, you cut that variability in half, roughly.
Right.
So there's that, and it's just also kind of a woodwind thing where we play sitting down.
So on the mouthpiece, the embouchure, are you still using a double reed on it like you do for the bassoons?
Yeah, just a larger double reed. Here we go. So this is a subcontrabassoon reed versus a contrabassoon reed.
Right. And then do you have like a bassoon one so that they could see like the different, like the progression? Yeah. So from like baby to like daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gigantic, but it actually doesn't feel that weird to play.
Did you cut your own reeds? Like you built this obviously, but you obviously developed the reed and cut it so that it would be bigger to match the needs for the instrument?
Yeah. It double reeds are very particular about the size of the reed has to match the instrument. So these instruments, the bassoons, saxophones, oboes, they're essentially a really long cone, but you can't bring the cone. Sorry, I'm pointing to something off screen. You can't bring this cone to a point because then you wouldn't be able to put air into it. So they cut off the cone at some point, and this reed has to acoustically make up that missing volume.
Right.
And if it doesn't, you have all sorts of problems with the instrument not playing in tune with itself.
Right.
So yeah, it was a completely different world. I make my own contrabassoon and bassoon reeds, so
Okay.
it wasn't that big of a stretch to make subcontrabassoon reeds. But even if I wanted to buy them, I couldn't because
There's nothing out there because this is the first prototype. I
yep.
love that. It's kind of like your own PBL, your project-based learning that we would do for kids in school, but you're like the real deal. And so it's premiering with our piece, The Symphony of Sorrowful Songs by the Goretzky that we have coming up. Do you want to talk a little bit about, will you be playing it in all three movements or is it just in particular moments in the symphony?
Yeah, well, so first of all, we are taking some small, I don't want to say liberties. One of the virtues of live music is that there's a little bit of room to experiment, to figure out things that maybe the composer didn't know about that we could add to the piece.
Oh, yeah.
If we were doing a recording, we would probably stick with exactly the instruments he wrote for.
Right, the contract.
But the bassoon and contrabassoon parts for the Goretzky's Third are pretty famous in the bassoon world because there are 8 notes. Yeah. 7 low E's and 1 low D. That's it. The whole part, they play in a few moments in the first movement, and then they sit quietly listening for the other 50 minutes of the piece. Now, on the one hand, that it's odd, but it also means that he obviously was saving the bassoons for something impactful. And if you look at how he wrote for it, it's kind of like this very low organ pedal around which all the other strings are moving, even the double basses. So I like to think that if when he was writing this, the subcontrabassoon was a thing, that he would have naturally thought of using it there.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but you know.
Well, it goes along with the opening statement of the piece. You have, you know, your low double basses playing and setting this kind of this dramatic and kind of lamenting kind of sound. I mean, it's hauntingly beautiful. The atmosphere that music creates in the beginning, this motif, this theme that keeps building and layering, and the density of the orchestra continues to get more and more as you progress through this first movement, and then it goes and it looks back, and I wonder if maybe he was kind of thinking in his mind with using the contrabassoon and the double bass of, you know, it's taken from the 15th century, right? Like looking at the Renaissance type period, and they've come out of, you know, the Gregorian monk time period, you know, and the chants that they would have had, and you know, the soloist comes out singing about this song of mother and child, as we're, you know, and just the agony and the grief there with that. And so I'm wondering, you know, if he uses these instruments to help emphasize, like you were saying, as you just play for this brief amount of time, but it's to bring accent and emphasis to these moments that he wanted to get across to the listener. I'm wondering if that's part of that reasoning.
I mean, that's part of my reasoning.
Yeah.
I didn't write the piece though, so
you know, one can only wonder. You know, obviously he's not here to be able to tell us about it, but you know, very powerful symphony. You know, it is what kind of propelled him to, you know, being you know, well known and famous, right? Because up to this point, you know, nobody really had known very much about this composer, and then this symphony happened, and it just kind of really propelled his career. Yeah. And so are you going to do any kind of demonstrations with this before like the concert? You know, I know you guys before, so a very SoNA Christmas, were in the lobby doing a performance with the bassoons, which was really, really cool. Will our audience get a chance to kind of see it up and in person and kind of hear it outside of the hall itself?
We haven't discussed that. You know, one thing to keep in mind is it's definitely not the subcontrabassoon concert, right? This is all about Miriam and Samuel, their solo works. You know, it's a lot of lyricism and a lot of drama for an orchestra concert. So if we do any kind of close-up demonstration of the subcontrabassoon, we would have to keep that in mind and make sure that the spotlight stays where it needs to be.
Yeah. Or maybe, you know, like in one of the rehearsals, I could do a live and show our audience, all right, so this is it in person. This is what it sounds like. So maybe we do something like that. You and I can talk about that.
Yeah, we can have a bassoon sectional. Play our 8 notes for the
in the middle of a rehearsal, be like, all right, we're coming to you live. This is a great example of what you're gonna see when you come to the concert. Yeah, something like that. We'll come up with something that way that they can be like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Yeah, so we're super excited about this concert, and you're exactly right. It is, you know, Miriam and Samuel are just going to be, you know, stars shining. You know, you have the Chichester Psalms by Bernstein, and then you have, you know, even William Grant Still's the Mother and Child piece that's just for strings that are on the first half of our program, and then on the second half we go to the Sorrowful Symphony. But it's an incredible program when you think about just where we are even in the world. I was talking with Miriam in our interview about this, just how it just kind of reflects where I think all of us are at, you know, and be able to, you know, it's music without words, or in a sense, you know, kind of helps be able to explain kind of where a lot of us are feeling right these days, I think. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with our audience? Maybe things that are next for you, or anything else about the concert that you would like to be able to speak to?
You know, not that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have a better answer than that.
No, it's all good. You know, we are so excited to see your creation be able to come to life, so to speak, with SoNA. And so thankful for your time today. And I think it's really cool that, you know, I think every generation has something to bring to the table, and the fact that you are still expanding and developing the orchestra and our sizes and what our instruments are able to do is pretty incredible. So kudos to you. That's awesome.
It should be interesting whether it's no matter what happens.
Well, I think our audience is going to be very intrigued and excited on top of all the great things that we have planned for them in January, but also to be able to get to see what you have built and developed. And we at SoNA are so grateful for you, for your talents, and for all that you bring to the table.
You as well.
Thank you, Richard. Well, everyone, we hope that you are making plans now to be able to come and join us for our concert coming up on Saturday, January the 7th. And you're getting your tickets, and be on the lookout for more information. We're going to have articles and links that you can listen to the music ahead of time. So be able to head to our website for SoNA for those things. And Richard, thank you again for your time today. And we will see all of you soon.
Thank you.
Hi, Richard.